Our final presenters are from Delta Development Group. Their presentation is titled A Strategic Playbook for Winning Public Funding. SEK is donating $500 to the nonprofit of their choice for being here today. They have chosen to split between Community Progress Council, which provides resources and support for individuals and families to move toward economic self-sufficiency in York County, and the Salvation Army in Harrisburg, which provides faith-based programs and services that meet human needs. I'll quickly introduce our speakers. Christian Muniz is the principal. He joined Delta in the spring of 2020 after 20 years of public and private sector government affairs experience within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As principal, he develops government relations and public funding strategies for nonprofit organizations, developers, educational institutions, and municipal and county governments. His professional background includes serving in the U.S. Navy, private sector, and the Pennsylvania government and politics. Luke Galyen is a senior associate. He assists the funding and community planning teams to deliver grant funding solutions to clients. His work includes all stages of the public funding process: project development, research, application preparation, stakeholder outreach, and grant administration and drawdown. And at Delta, he has helped secure and administer over $20 million in funding for entities throughout the United States. So I will unshare my screen and I will let you two get started.
So I'll just briefly introduce you to Delta for those who have not worked with us or heard of us. So we have a number of practices. Today we're going to be focusing on the funding side of our house, which is probably the most active, along with government relations. But we also do community and economic development planning. We have a disaster preparedness practice, and also transit. Our core work is in Pennsylvania, and it has been for 38 years now, but we do work across the country. And as of last year, in our first territory in the Virgin Islands, most of the work across the country is federal appropriations, but we do work with other state governments. For example, most recently, Luke did quite a bit of work in New York State. And I know some colleagues have done work in the Pacific Northwest, I think in Oregon, and also West Virginia and Virginia. A lot of what we're going to highlight today is this process that we use. And this is just a real basic overview, and we'll get into some of these details in the subsequent slides. But with most clients, and we do represent a lot of nonprofits, we take a nuanced approach depending on the project size and scope. We'll often sit down and identify what their priorities are. If it's a building project, for example, we put together an initial strategy and identify the types of fundings we believe the client would be eligible for. As needed, we also have a lot of licensed software, so we can pull together economic impact reports, market assessment. A lot of this comes in handy when we're pursuing public funds because we can show the impact of the project, the impact in terms of, for example, job creation, new tax revenue to local, county, state, and federal government, those types of data points. But it can go well beyond that as well. And then at Delta, every client has different needs. I'm kind of giving you an example of a client who is using all of our services, but we'll take the lead in writing the grant applications. We coordinate with the client, of course. They assist. They have final editing requirements before submission, because probably 80 to 90% of all public funds are tied to political support. We also do the government relations in helping the client build, deepen, and expand their relationships, both in Harrisburg. In your case, you're all PA-based entity, so in Harrisburg, but also in Washington, D.C. And then we do the administration of the grant. So if anyone here has ever worked with certain public funds like the Office of Budget Capital Redevelopment Program, RACB, you probably are aware of just how much it takes to get from the nice photo op with a check presentation to actually being reimbursed. So whether that means usually it means working with your project team. For example, if it's a building project, we're working with your architects, your engineers, and your in-house folks. We are none of those things, but we do review things like bid documents. We look at pay certifications because of the uh, requirements of things like prevailing wage or Davis-Bacon wages, depending on whether you're working with federal or state funds. Um, what we try to do is minimize or eliminate any mistakes early on in the project that can cost you months, if not years in time before you get your reimbursement at the end of the project. A lot of times, organizations will be spinning their wheels for months and months and months to get reimbursement because most public funds are reimbursement based, which means you've got to spend the money before you can get reimbursed. But if you're dealing with an issue of, say, underpaid workers that have already left the site, and their work was done 6 months prior, we've got to identify those folks and make sure they're paid the amount of money they were underpaid before we get the funding. So we do all of these things. This is mostly sequential, but when we get to government relations, I would say that could come at any point, and indeed, the sooner the better when it comes to building political relationships. And,
Thanks, Christian, for that overview and of the grant cycle. And so next, we're going to kind of dive into three of the really key components of the grant process that really, if you focus on these three things, this is how you actually get funds, how your applications become awarded. These are the things you really want to focus on. And this is true for any type of organization. If you're a municipality, an economic development organization, a nonprofit, these three key strategies are really what move the needle. So the first one that we'll jump more into in the next slide is building your story. So building your story. So this is where you really want to focus on what problem is this project solving, or what need is this meeting, or how is this improving the community around you? And so yeah, tying it into those considerations makes your grant application more attractive. It helps you be more consistent when you answer different application components in a grant application. So really getting your messaging down on what need is it meeting, why is it significant, is really critical. And then within building your story, it's also important to just have key details figured out, so that when you're communicating with people about the project, that you have those details are consistent. So timeline of the project, when will key work happen? If it's a construction project, when is engineering happening? When will construction start? If it's more of a programmatic project, just having key milestones of, like, maybe if you have to hire people, making sure you have those, the hiring process and the timeline. That is very important. ownership, who's going to manage the project or maintain it, resources. So just knowing what money, people, what existing programs, existing staffing capabilities, existing support, knowing what resources are in place and building that into your story so you can show we can actually get this project done. That's a very important piece of building your story. And then you always have to show if it's a grant program, they want to know, why should we fund this? How are we benefiting? So talking about the yield for them, for the organization offering the grant, is also very important. So talking about what is the return on investment, often talking about like the tax benefit that might be generated by the project. Those are all the important pieces that you just have to consider. How do you integrate that into a coherent story, consistent story that you're pitching to all stakeholders and to all applications that you're applying to? And then one very specific thing that we recommend is considering before going after funding for implementation or starting things, is going after planning funds. There are lots of different grants out there that give you money just to plan the project, and then that has two benefits. One, it gives you time and resources to do things like build your story. It helps you develop a really compelling story, make sure you get all the details down. But then two, there's many implementation grants that give priority standing to projects that have already been funded through planning funds. So that's just a trick of the trade is if you have the opportunity to apply for planning funds first, it makes things a lot easier. It makes you more competitive when you're going after implementation funds.
I'll take on partnerships, and then after this, political relationships, because the two often overlap, and with good reason. So with any of your projects, and as leaders in the nonprofit community, I think most of you, if not all of you, already understand the value of partnerships, especially when you're often striving to do more with less. Partnerships help you, and it's the same in the process of pursuing public funding. Helps to build legitimacy. It very often expands your capacity, because you find out your partners, those partners that become your champions are often willing to offer their expertise and their time, and so ultimately it will help your project. And it all ties into politics, and when politics is at its best, it's a game of addition. And elected members who make the decisions on what projects to fund, when they see numbers behind it, numbers in terms of people, community leaders, elected local, municipal or county folks, it does help, and it helps in other ways as well. Going back to the previous screen and weaving it into partnerships, in telling your story, something might seem obvious to you that isn't obvious to the public officials that make decisions. And one recent example in my mind, because it was eye-opening for me, is recently started working with an animal shelter in Fayette County. And I thought I knew what an animal shelter was, but I often thought of the nonprofit side, which is about finding homes for the animals they're caring for. But my mindset changed on this when I realized, from working with our client, that Pennsylvania is the only state in the country that does not have shelters as a matter of local or county government. And this is getting away from the nonprofit side of the house and more towards the public safety side of the house. So in all other states, the part of a shelter that responds to like if there's a stray animal in a community, if there is a case of hoarding, for example, if there is a report of a rabid cat or a rabid colony of cats and some individuals were bitten. In all other states, it's a function of local or county government, except Pennsylvania. So our shelters effectively are playing a role that elsewhere is paid for through tax dollars and is a function of public health and safety. And I also learned that under Title 68, animal shelters can hire as an employee a fully sanctioned police officer, a humane police officer. They're armed, they're badged, they're sanctioned by the state. The only major difference is they know how to respond to animal related calls, whereas our traditional police don't. So when we begin to tell their story, yes, we'll talk about the nonprofit side, and in all states, there is the nonprofit side that helps shelter and then find homes for animals and care for animals. But we're telling the story of the public safety side, the quasi-governmental side, and making the argument that's why public funds should be invested into their projects so that they can do an even better job at keeping people safe, keeping communities safe, and keeping animals safe. And so they'll be having, when we do site tours, they'll have their humane police officer there in uniform with his gun and his badge. We'll have municipal leaders there who can speak firsthand to how important the work of the shelter is in Fayette County when they have a call into them that their traditional police officers can't handle. And I wouldn't have known that unless I'd spent time with them. And although the shelter knew that, I don't think they realized how much the public did not realize that the full scope of their work. And when I say the public, that also accounts for their legislators at the state and federal level. You also find in building these relationships that some of these groups, individuals, organizations that become your partners, they may have matching funds to contribute. Many public funding grants require matching funds, so it's a way to help build your private fundraising side. And I've never worked on a project where having more people at the table and rallying in support of your project doesn't ultimately make it a stronger project. Now to the political side, I will say that this is the part that if I'm ever asked what's the perfect time to start building political relationships, I'll usually say immediately. Don't wait until you've applied for a grant, if at all possible. Build a relationship immediately. But when you do apply for funding, in almost all cases, you're going to need political support. In fact, even if you have the best written grant application, if you don't have the support of, say, your local legislators, if you're applying for state funding, it simply isn't going to happen. And a lot of times, I like to emphasize the importance of their staff as well. A lot of times when we bring a client to Harrisburg for the first time, and we have a whole day of meetings set before them, the first meeting of the day you may walk in the door and a staffer greets you and says, Senator so-and-so, unfortunately, has gotten called away to a committee meeting. So you're going to be meeting with me first, and we'll get you set up with him at a later date. Well, I'll tell you, it might seem disappointing to you, but that is a stroke of luck. That might be the meeting that 8 months later made the difference between you getting your funding or not getting it. While you always want to build a relationship with the elected members themselves, um, you have to also build a relationship with staff because they keep the members focused. They tend to be able to delve into more of the details and understand a project because their bosses are dealing with a variety of other issues on a day-to-day basis. But when it comes time to sit down and determine what are going to be their priority projects, it's not just the elected member. It has to be the staff too that you're building the relationship with. Do some homework ahead of time and understand what are their priorities. Why did they run for office? What are their legislative priorities? Visit their website, look at press releases, try to understand what energizes them, and if there's some tie into your project, make that case. One thing that's important is, don't sort of be that fair weather friend. You're just showing up when you're asking for something. If there's a way in building that relationship to pull them into your world, whatever, however that looks like, maybe you're doing an employee award ceremony or some other sort of celebratory event. Invite them. You, your employees, and those you serve very often are their constituents, and they see the numbers there, the number of employees, the impact on the community, the types of folks you're helping and serving. So that's meaningful to have those opportunities to pull them into your world, your professional world, even when you're not asking them for anything. Tying it to the partnerships, I mean, many of you will be building relationships with local elected officials, and don't forget that local elected officials often already have relationships with the state or federal legislators that you'll be seeking support for when you apply for public funding. Call them to your cause. Ask your mayor, township supervisor, figure out who knows whom, and try to employ them on your behalf to put a good word in. It's highly competitive. We really don't work with any pots of funding at the federal or state level that aren't continuously oversubscribed. And so all of this work is very important. Almost every grant application is going to require a letter of support. That's the absolute bare minimum to being competitive. Everything we've talked to up to this point is even more critical. And I'll point out too that sometimes letters of support, if any of you are familiar with the Commonwealth Finance Authority or RACB, those applications require a letter of support to be submitted with them. In the case of the CFA, their staff, put it in a file. It's usually addressed to the Secretary of DCD. In the case of RACB, it's typically addressed to the Budget Secretary. The kicker is that those individuals aren't deciding the fate of that funding request. It's your senator, it's your House member, it's the administration writ large. And so you've got to think of ways to get to them to win support. So if I was going to have support letters written for a CFA grant request, I'd want my supporters to be writing a letter of support to your House and Senate member first before it's not as important as submitting it with your application. And your House and Senate members won't see those letters. And then when you get to your House and Senate member, if they want to write a support letter, what's most important there is it goes to their leadership, because it's the leadership of each caucus that will decide which funding requests are getting awarded. And that's also when you can pull together your stakeholders, all those partnerships that you've built, the army of champions that you've helped build. That's when you want to have them engaged as well in reaching out to your elected legislators.
Thanks, Christian. So we just walked through again the three keys to getting a project funded: building your story, building partnerships, and then thinking about the political tie-in and doing political outreach. So if you've done those three things, you're well positioned to get funded. And then once you get funded, however, the grant process does not end there. There's actually still additional steps you need to go through that can be equally time consuming and complicated to the application process. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of the key things to consider after you've been awarded. So really the first and by far most important thing to do is to make sure you review your grant agreement thoroughly. So this is the document that stipulates the scope of the project that's been funded, what you can actually use the money for. It stipulates are there any conditions that you need to meet with, like key requirements. It gives you reporting deadlines, and it also will outline the process that you need to go through to submit for reimbursement. Because most grants are reimbursement on a reimbursement basis, so they don't just give you money up front. You have to incur the costs first, and then you submit documentation to show you've made those payments, and then they give you the money. So reading the grant agreements just helps you understand everything that is involved in using the funds you've been awarded. The next thing is to really, once you understand the grant agreement, get organized, make sure you have systems set up for budgeting, tracking, and reporting. Many grant programs require that you be able to track the grant funds separately throughout your accounting system. So making sure that you have that in place, that you have clear processes and procedures in place for who's in charge of submitting the reimbursement requirements, who's in charge of keeping up with reporting. That also, doing that early on in the process positions you to make sure that you comply correctly and that you actually get the money you were awarded. And then it's very common for small issues to come up. Maybe your timeline gets extended, or a staff member leaves, or your plans for a program change slightly. That's all very common, and most grant programs and the staff members that run those grant programs, they're willing to work with you to some extent. And so the best thing to do is to be proactive about those changes in your projects, and just to, as soon as you know something's changing, reach out, let them know, ask them, is there anything I need to submit? Do we need to go through like a formal extension process or a formal modification process? Just keeping the point people on the funder side informed of what's going on with your project is really essential, and really keeps things smooth and makes sure that things actually get done. A couple just common requirements that go with public funding that you should be aware of, that you would most likely should be in your grant agreement, one is competitive bidding. So most grant programs, especially if they're construction based, you can't just go out and hire one construction company. You have to go through a full competitive bidding process where you secure multiple bids and then rank them and then select the best bid. So that's a really common process that you have to go through when you get grant funding. Complying with prevailing wage requirements is another really common one, especially with construction projects where the contractors have to pay specific wages to their workers. So that's really common. Environmental review requirements is another frequent requirement where you have to complete a review process on the environmental impact of a project before work can begin. And then, especially when it's federal, Build America, Buy America, American Steel, those are also very common federal grant requirements. So those are just things to keep in mind, that just challenges that you might have to comply with, and reviewing your grant agreement, keeping organized, and just communicating proactively with agency point people that'll help you stay on top of those requirements. And it looks like the next poll has popped up for you guys to work on in the background.
We'll just close out with a few examples of some non-client work we've done. First is Lafayette College. They really came to us maybe a little over a decade ago. They were approached by the city of Easton, which had received a large RACB that really at the time didn't have the wherewithal to administer it, to match the funding. And it was a great example of a nonprofit working with their home municipality and doing a lot of great things across town. There were what was really important to both the city and the college was to find a lot of new reuse space. So with the initial RACB award and other matching funds they were able to attract, they redid the Reineck Rope Works building, the Simon Silk Mill, and for multi-purpose use. That relationship led to agreement. Both the city and the campus were very keen on improving pedestrian safety and also connectivity to the campus, which sits high up on a hill and otherwise had been very difficult to traverse back and forth, both for the community looking to get to campus for events and students looking to come downtown and enjoy downtown Easton. And over the past decade plus, that's exactly what we've worked on, with very often the college being the lead on behalf of the city, even if it's purely improvements to city infrastructure. The next two clients are Luke's.
So Christian just showed an example of a nonprofit that had a larger project. We also work with clients that are looking for smaller programmatic requests. And so one of them is Catholic Charities. We've helped them get over $900,000 in programmatic funding over the years. And specifically for their St. Samuel Center, which is a residential program that has a homeless shelter, a maternity home, and a residential treatment program for women recovering from substance addiction. And the key challenge that we help them with is in securing funding is they're looking for basically operating funds, but most grants do not want to cover operating funds. So we help them position their projects and frame their projects as just you have to consistently frame things as new projects or expansions. That is what people want to fund. So you can do that by just if you have multiple programs, rotating through those programs to keep asks fresh, and that'll help things seem like they're new. So just looking at your budget, breaking it up into kind of bite-size programmatic chunks, and then rotating through those smaller budgets. That's how you make things seem like they're new or expansions, and that's how you get operating funds from grant programs that aren't necessarily designed for operating funding. You can monitor. There are occasional grant programs that are designed to support operations and to support programs. So on the next slide, with the Salvation Army is an example of a grant program that we were able to secure for them that actually did just straight up support one of their programs. So the Salvation Army, they do a variety of things, but one of their big programs is after school and summer programming. They have 3 after school and summer programs: Roller Enrichment Academy, Thrive, and Steam Roller Academy. They serve over 200 students a year, and we helped them get over $4 million through the Pennsylvania Department of Education 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant, which is a federal pass-through grant. So it's federal funds going through the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We helped them get those funds, and that has helped sustain completely their educational programs, which was wonderful. Those are kind of like that's the type of program that it's rare, but if you keep a lookout for it and it pops up, it can really transform your organization by letting you just have a whole new program. The risk with having a program that is entirely dependent on grant funds is when they expire, or if a new administration comes in and doesn't keep funding it, then you have to scramble to find other sources, or you have to cut that program. So that's just something to consider. Is there's occasional no problem, Christian. There's occasional really wonderful grant programs that can like transform your organization and fund an entire program, but you just want to be cautious and really think through, are you okay being dependent on grant funds for that program?
And sorry, Luke. And finally, the YWC Lancaster is a great example of some nonprofit that when they came to us, they just had no idea how to start their project because it was so expansive. Their new CEO had come on board a little over 5 years ago. The previous board had okayed the so-called Y Forward project, which was to totally transform their beautiful old historic building in downtown Lancaster and modernize it to better address their mission today, as opposed to the way it was originally structured. They wanted to add affordable housing units. They wanted to add significant ADA enhancement throughout. Their sexual assault prevention and counseling center, effectively the county rape crisis center, had no meaningful space for them to help survivors. And essentially, we started out by doing a feasibility study and a strategic funding study for them, where we could break those goals into silos, each of which could be accomplished through targeting certain type of funding towards it. And just to give you a sense of, we've now completed the first 3 or 4 phases. They have 17 new affordable housing units that just opened a month ago. The Rape Crisis Center is a beautiful ground level center that was built over top of what had originally been the building's indoor pool, but was no longer used. New stretcher size ADA elevator, historic renovation funds that has improved the outside entrance to their historic porch with ADA access. But just to give you a snapshot, this was continuous effort in tracking. If you can see this spreadsheet, I just pulled one from the middle of 2024. You can see how we broke down the elevator and the infill that would create a second floor where basically an unused auditorium existed. So we had more square footage to build affordable units. The historic porch and ADA access and the rape crisis center. And it's how we systematically work to chip away in the cost of each of those until we could get to a point to put shovels in the ground and begin the construction. And we worked very closely with their engineer, who also serves as their project manager, and their other contractors, to ensure that they could prepare their timeline based on the incoming funding. So, we've worked to do the small one-off projects when we maybe just need to apply for a grant once or twice a year, to the more comprehensive ones. And we've covered a lot of ground, really just trying to skim the surface on this world that we work in. Not sure if there's any questions, but if there are, we're happy to take them.